honorable guests, members of the Crimean Tatar and Ukrainian communities, dear friends. Today we gather outside Ontario Legislature for two important reasons. One is a cheerful and historic moment, and the other one is a tragic and sad moment. Today, for the first time in Ontario's history, the Crimean Tatar flag was raised at Queen's Park at 10 a.m. this morning by the President of the Canadian Association of Crimean Tatars, Rustem Irsay. This is indeed a historic moment for the Crimean Tatar community of Ontario, Canada, and really the Crimean Tatars all over the world. Today, the blue flag with a golden tamga will be proudly waving for the people of Ontario to see. Isn't this a great opportunity for Ontarians to educate themselves about the history of this proud nation? We're grateful to all MPPs present here today and all those who supported the motion to raise Crimean Tatar flag. To all of you and your colleagues, we say, Chok Salnus, thank you very much. The other reason why we gather here today is to commemorate the innocent victims of a horrific genocide, which was orchestrated by Joseph Stalin in 1944, also known as the deportation of Crimean Tatars. Annually, on May 18th, Crimean Tatars gather to remember their family members who perished while being transported in cattle cars to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, or Siberia, or who died in exile and never saw their homeland again. Every Crimean Tatar has a story associated with the deportation. It is a very sad story. These stories are painful to date. They have left a huge scar that constantly reminds us about the great tragedy that happened to this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to join me in a moment of silence for those innocent victims who died for they loved their homeland. I would now like to invite MPPs to speak on stage. So the first one would be MPP for Etobicoke Centre, Ivan Baker.
Thank you very much, and it's a tremendous honor to be here today. I'm here with my colleague Sophie Koala from Kingston and the Islands, and we bring you greetings on behalf of our Premier Kathleen Wynne and our entire Liberal caucus. I know that the Premier would want to be here today. She is in Israel on a trade mission, so could not be here, but asked me to bring greetings on her behalf. In great part because I understand this is the first time that the Crimean Tatar flag has been flown at a Canadian legislature anywhere in Canada. But it is also special because we are here with some very special guests, and in particular with Mr. Jamiliev, who is the recognized leader of the Crimean Tatar movement, a member of Parliament of Ukraine, and a hero, I think, to all of us here today. Thank you, Mr. Jamiliev, for being here. We have with us a number of dignitaries and a number of community leaders, and I hope you will forgive me, but I do want to acknowledge a few of the folks who are here with us today, and I hope I don't miss anyone. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Lyudmila Davidovich, from the Consul General of Ukraine in Toronto. I understand Svetoslav Kavetsky is also here from the Ukrainian consulate. Slav, дякую. I'd like to welcome Evdeniz Sen, the Consul General of Turkey in Toronto. Thank you. Gökhan Toy, who's the Vice Consul of the Republic of Turkey. I'd like to welcome Rustem Irsay, who's the President of the Canadian Association of Crimean Tatars. And Anton, I'd like to acknowledge you again as well for your leadership, also from the Canadian Association of Crimean Tatars. It was Rustem and Anton, who I had the pleasure of joining this morning at 10 a.m. when we raised this flag, and it was a poignant moment for all of us. Thank you for your leadership and for organizing us here today. In May of 1944, Joseph Stalin forcibly deported 240,000 Crimean Tatars to Central Asia. Many of them were women and children, and over 100,000 of them died. And today we commemorate the victims of this unspeakable crime. Among those who survived was Mustafa Dzhemilev, and he spent decades demanding, fighting for the cause of having his people return home, that they be allowed to return to their homeland. And for his advocacy and for his leadership, he spent 18 years in the Soviet Gulag. He is, as I mentioned earlier, the recognized leader of the Crimean Tatar national movement. He's a member of parliament of Ukraine, and I am honored that he is here with us in front of the legislature. And I'd like to say to you, Mr. Dzhemilev, Hoş geldiniz, Mustafa Aga. Welcome, Mustafa. You know, I can't stand here and speak to this without speaking about what is happening now in Crimea. 2 years ago, Russia annexed Crimea, and history is once again repeating itself. The Russian regime is once again persecuting the Crimean Tatar people. They have closed mosques, they have closed their media, and closed the Majlis, which is the legislature of the Crimean Tatar people. And the Crimean Tatar people are now facing persecution, there are disappearances, and there are executions as well. Mr. Dzhemilev's own son, I understand, has been put in jail, and Mr. Dzhemilev himself has not been allowed to return. Just this week, Crimean Tatar singer Jamala represented Ukraine at the Eurovision Song Contest. She performed a song about the 1944 deportations. Jamala moved and inspired millions of people, and that's why she won the Eurovision Song Contest. And I know we're incredibly proud of Jamala for what she's achieved. We fly the flag here today, Crimean Tatar flag, to commemorate the victims of the 1944 deportation. Let us remember and let us commemorate them today, but let us also take this opportunity to learn history's lessons and redouble our efforts to ensure that the Crimean Tatar people can once again live in freedom in a Crimea as part of a free and independent Ukraine. Mr. Dzhemilev, the Crimean Tatar people, and the hundreds of thousands of victims of the 1944 deportation deserve no less. Slava Crimean Tataram, Yashasin Kirim Tatarlar. And if you'll bear with me, I would just like to read the greetings from our Premier Kathleen Wynne. On behalf of the Government of Ontario, I offer warm greetings to Mr. Mustafa Dzhemilev, the recognized leader of the Crimean Tatar national movement and member of Parliament of Ukraine, members of Ontario's Crimean Tatar community, and other distinguished guests attending the raising of the Crimean Tatar flag at Queen's Park. Today we remember and mourn the loss of those who perished during the forceful deportation of the Crimean Tatars orchestrated by the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in 1944. This day of remembrance is an opportunity to renew our commitment to the principles from which we draw respect and understanding. The act of remembering remains vital to ensuring that both the victims and the survivors of this horrific deportation never vanish from the annals of history, and that we pay tribute to their memory now and in the future. 2 years ago, Crimea was annexed by Russia, and today, once again, the Crimean Tatar people are under threat. The Ontario government is firm in our support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We stand with the international community in our commitment to end foreign aggression and intervention in Ukraine to ensure its freedom, democracy, and independence, and that of its people. On this solemn occasion, I offer my respect and best wishes. May their memory be eternal. Vichna im pamyat Elvida. Signed Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario. And if I may, I'd like to present this to you, Mr. Dzhemilev. Дякую. Дякую. Дуже вам дякую.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. MPP Van Baker, thank you for your leadership on that cause, and thank you for proposing this motion. We really appreciate it. I would now like to call upon MPP Catherine Five. She's from Kitchener-Waterloo. She's an NDP finance critic. Catherine.
Good afternoon. I wanted to welcome all of you to Queen's Park. This is a historical day for us in Ontario and for this country. The importance of you being here today stems from the education that we all need on the issues that have affected Crimean Tatars. The deportation of Crimean Tatars is a shameful chapter in the history of the world, actually. The trials they endured because of Stalin's actions in 1944 undoubtedly continue to have an impact today. The conditions they faced on the journey away from their homes were harrowing. The xenophobia and the cultural destruction they faced in the years followed were equally troubling and affected generations of Crimean Tatars. No people should have to suffer through this kind of injustice, and I stand before you today in solidarity with you to ensure that one day we will celebrate justice and independence. Thank you for being here today. It is a privilege, it is an honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I would now like to call upon MPP for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, who represents the Progressive Conservative Party. He's also an
Thank you very much, Anton, for the invitation to join you here today. Greetings to Mr. Jamilyev, Consul General Davidovich, Consul General Shen. It's an honor for me to speak today on behalf of Patrick Brown and the PC Caucus. The legislature, I was proud as a member of the legislature to have this motion unanimously consented to by the legislature. For the first time, the Crimean Tatar flag flies at a legislature in this world. For the first time ever. And we are proud to have leadership in that regard. And I thank MPP Baker for proposing that motion. You know, it's a shame sometimes that we have to gather like this to draw attention to the crimes of the past that are all too easily forgotten sometimes. But the deportation of the Crimean Tatars in 1944, as has been said, over 200,000 in the span of a few days. Women and children, there's over 100,000 of those perished. A crime of such proportion at a time when the world was at war, that perhaps the attention that should have been given was not. But we as a free society today, and one that stands with our Ukrainian brethren and Crimean Tatars, stand together in solidarity, condemning such genocides and crimes against humanity. We stand with you today calling for a united Ukraine, with Crimea as part of that Ukraine, Crimean Tatars as part of their citizenry. And we stand in condemning the continued oppression that Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians face at the hands of Russia. Joseph Stalin was a historic criminal, and his acts cannot be unaddressed, and we as Canadians have to stand and condemn them on every occasion that we can. Today we are proud to fly your flag, and we will be proud at someday, hopefully in the not too distant future, to see your flag fly proudly over Crimea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John Yakubuski. I would now like to introduce Consul General of Ukraine in Toronto, Lyudmila Davidovich.
Thank you, Anton. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear MPPs, Вельмишановний пане Jamilyev, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for your gathering here today. It is very precious for us today. On May 18th, we commemorated a very sad date. 72 years of illegal deportation of Crimean Tatars by Soviet regime from their native land, Crimea Peninsula. In May 1944, almost 240,000 people were deported from the Crimean Peninsula as a result of a state-organized and forcible action ordered by then Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. The lack of accommodation facilities, failure to adapt to a new climate and living conditions, spreading of diseases made and caused the deaths of almost 50% of innocent human lives, people, Crimean Tatars. 72 years ago, Crimean Tatars had found themselves alone in their trouble with Kremlin regime, which had subjected them to cruel challenges. Today, illegal occupational Russian regime tries to act the same way. During Russia's occupation of the Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, the occupying power falls into Stalinist repressions against Crimean Tatars and their leaders, bans Majlis as a single supreme representative and executive body of the Crimean Tatars, carries out illegal searches, political motivated prosecution of activists and groundless accusations of Crimean Tatars of extremism and terrorism. Policies enforced by Russian occupation authorities have led to the following. Since Crimea's occupation, more than 20,000 Crimean Tatars have fled their homes and settled in Ukraine's mainland in search for a better life. Majlis was forced to relocate its activities to Kiev. The world cannot allow the repetition of the Crimean Tatars tragedy. It is a joint position of Ukraine, Canada, European countries, United States of America, of all democracies in this world, of prominent international organizations, and other partners all around the world. We have millions of friends all around the world. The protection of rights of Crimean Tatars and other nations living in Crimea is under constant attention of the Ukrainian authorities. Ukraine has raised an issue of not only prolongation but also reinforcement of international sanctions against Russia and its puppets in Crimea, taking into account an aggravated situation with human rights and freedoms on the peninsula. In his speech delivered in the course of the evening requiem in memory of victims of genocide of the Crimean Tatar people on May 18, President Poroshenko of Ukraine emphasized that our task is to protect the Crimean Tatar people in its homeland. And our strategic task is to liberate the Ukrainian peninsula from Russian occupation, step by step. We have finally realized the necessity of establishing the national autonomy of Crimean Tatars in Crimea with full guarantee of equal rights and civil liberties of ethnic Russians, Ukrainians, and other ethnic groups of the peninsula, Petro Poroshenko noted. The President is going to urge the Constitutional Commission to establish the working group on the elaboration of amendments to the given chapter of the Constitution of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to express gratitude to all of you for this beautiful flag-raising ceremony, which is an outstanding sign of support of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, as well as of recognition of rights and freedoms of Crimean Tatar people. Crimea was, is, and will remain the integral part of Ukraine. The counter-criminal will be forced to return the loot sooner or later, no matter how long the process of the occupation may take. Thank you very much, dear friends, for your support. Thank you, Ivan Baker, for initiating this beautiful and so important for us event. Thank you, Mr. Jamilev, for your courage and for your leadership to Crimean Tatar nation. Thank you, dear friends. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davidovich. Now it is my honor to introduce the President of the Canadian Association of Crimean Tatars, Rustem Irsay.
Thank you, Anton. Dear members of Provincial Parliament, honorable guests, dear friends, dear Mr. Mustafa Jamilov, our leader and our love. It's my honor to be speaking at the first ever Crimean Tatar Flag-Raising Ceremony at the Queen's Park. On behalf of the Crimean Tatar community in Ontario and across Canada, I would like to say thank you to all members of this legislature for supporting a motion to prominently display Crimean Tatar flag at the most important building in this province. Yesterday, Crimean Tatars were commemorating the victims of the horrific genocide perpetrated on us by Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Over 200,000 Crimean Tatars were forced into cattle cars and deported to Central Asia and Siberia, away from their homes. Over 100,000 of them died and never saw their homelands again. This year, our community is honored to commemorate the victims of Crimean Tatar genocide together with the leader of the Crimean Tatar people, Mustafa Jamilov, who was a child when he was deported with his family to Uzbekistan. Today, Crimean Tatars are facing a new wave of repressions. Many of our leaders are illegally imprisoned. Others, like Mustafa Jamilov, are banned from entering Crimea. All these persecutions occur simply because we want to live on our land, educate our children in their mother tongue, build cultural centers, pray to our God, and operate our own mass media. Is this a lot to ask? In a country where human rights and law are supreme, this is not a lot. I want to read you a very short letter which the Vice President of the Crimean Tatar Parliament, Mejlis Ahtem Chigos, sent us from behind the bars. He wrote, "Our nation has faced multiple challenges over time, but we overcame them with dignity. Prisons and camps will not break us. Illegal searches and detentions will not break us. We will not be fooled by the devil. Crimea will never be without Crimean Tatars." I thank you all for coming here today, for supporting our cause, and for the commemorating together with us the innocent victims of the horrific tragedy. Thank you very much. Yes, and I would like to ask to come here on the stage our leader, Mustafa Jamilov. Please welcome.
Dear friends, değerli arkadaşlar, шановні друзі. Как известно, в жизни каждого народа, в каждой стране есть какие-то знаменательные даты. Как правило, это дни каких-то побед, дни провозглашения независимости, сон, радостные события, которые объединяют этот народ.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, every nation has a day, a very special day in their history that they commemorate. Most of the time, we commemorate bright dates. They include Independence Day or other celebratory events.
Но так сложилась судьба крымско-татарского народа, что главной знаковой датой этого многострадального народа является день катастрофы, день депортации. Когда весь наш народ поголовно до единого человека был выведен с своей территории на смерть, на уничтожение.
but it happened so that the most important day in the history of Crimean Tatars is the day of deportation. The day when all of our fellow Crimean Tatars were deported from their homeland and
Задача советской власти заключалась в том, чтобы уничтожить этот народ полностью, стереть с лица земли, потому что одновременно с физическим уничтожением уничтожали все культурные ценности крымско-татарского народа. Были ликвидированы даже кладбища в Крыму, переименованы все населенные пункты. Все, что делалось крымскими татарами на протяжении многих веков, систематически уничтожалось советской властью.
it is clear that what the Soviets were trying to do is exterminate our nation. After we left, after we were deported from Crimea, our cemeteries were ruined. Everything that we built for centuries was liquidated.
По различным оценкам, в результате депортации погибло от 38 до 46% всего нашего народа. Это был настоящий геноцид. Поэтому решением Верховной Рады Украины в ноябре прошлого года преступление, совершенное советским российским режимом в 1944 году, названо преступлением геноцид. И неделю тому назад Верховная Рада приняла постановление, приняла обращение ко всем странам мира с призывом признать депортацию крымско-татарского народа преступлением геноцида.
The official numbers are that between 38 and 46% of Crimean Tatars were exterminated during deportation. Last year, the government of Ukraine recognized the deportation of Crimean Tatars by the Soviet Russian regime as a genocide against Crimean Tatars. About a week ago, the Ukrainian government called on international governments around the world to support this and adopt legislation that would proclaim the deportation of Crimean Tatars as a genocide.
Оставшиеся в живых после депортации и геноцида крымские татары в течение нескольких десятилетий боролись за возвращение на свою историческую родину, боролись против тоталитарного советского режима. И возвращение стало возможным лишь в последние дни советской власти после ослабления коммунистического режима и провозглашения независимости Украины.
For decades following the deportation, Crimean Tatars were fighting for their right to return back to their homeland. And it was only possible for them to return back to Crimea in the last days of communist regime, in the last day of the totalitarian regime, in the first days of the Ukrainian independence.
Тяжело было нашему народу само возвращение, не все успели еще вернуться, но живя в демократическом государстве, мы шаг за шагом имели возможность отстаивать свои права. Но этот процесс был остановлен 2 года тому назад. Началась новая беда крымско-татарского народа – оккупация нашей территории Российской Федерации.
It was not easy to return back home. Life was not easy. But we lived in a democratic society, and we were building everything, rebuilding our institutions, and it was possible under the governance of Ukraine. But 2 years ago, after Russia illegally annexed Crimea, this development was impeded.
Сейчас оккупационные власти обрушились репрессиями на крымско-татарский народ, потому что весь народ, практически весь народ и представительный орган Меджлис крымско-татарского народа четко и ясно заявил, что он не признает и не будет признавать оккупацию Крыма, что он видит свое будущее только в составе единой Украины.
We know why the Russian government is oppressing Crimean Tatars today. It is due to the fact that the Medjlis, the parliament of Crimean Tatars, supported Ukraine and supported Crimea being a part of Ukraine. And this is precisely why we're paying the price right now.
Крымские татары, которые многие годы возвращались с большим трудом на свою родину, боролись против тоталитарного режима, вновь оказались под тоталитарным полуфашистским путинским режимом и вновь оказались в условиях, когда многие из них, стремясь сохранить свою жизнь, свою свободу, вынуждены покидать свою историческую родину.
The new Russian fascist Putin regime in Crimea is oppressing our people. But we know that we'll stay strong. And now we're back to where we came from. Shortly after the deportation of Crimean Tatars, we were oppressed, and now we're oppressed again. And many people now are forced to flee Crimea again.
Но мы надеемся и верим, что это долго продолжаться не будет. Не может в 21 веке продолжаться такой произвол. Не может долго существовать такое гангстерское государство, которое считает себя вправе, по праву сильного, захватывать чужие территории. Мировое сообщество никогда с этим не согласится.
We believe that this regime is not long-lived. The regime, such a regime in the 21st century that is oppressing its people, cannot be sustainable. This regime will eventually fall.
Я очень надеюсь, что в ближайшее время у крымско-татарского народа появится новая светлая дата. День освобождения Крыма от оккупантов.
And I sincerely hope that in the nearest future we will be celebrating a very bright date, a day of deoccupation of Crimea.
Здесь я хотел бы выразить свою особую признательность государству Канады, его руководству, той консервативной партии, которая решительно осудила оккупацию и эффективно, решительно поддерживала нашу страну, наш народ в борьбе против оккупантов.
In this regard, I would like to thank Canada. I would like to thank the previous conservative government that was standing shoulder and shoulder with Ukraine and supporting Ukraine.
Я уверен, что мировое сообщество никогда не примирится с этим, и мы надеемся, что та политика, которая проводилась с момента оккупации канадским правительством, она будет продолжена в Украине.
On this day, and he's here, thousands of kilometers away from his home Crimea, and the Crimean Tatar flag is flying high over Queen's Park. So he's very grateful to this symbolic gesture. He's very grateful to the Premier of this province. He's very grateful to the Ontario legislature for making this happen. And Slava Ukraini! Glory to Ukraine! This is the end of our official event. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for joining us today. And there is another event later on tonight at Old Mill at 6 p.m. So if you would like to join Mr. Jamila for a Q&A tonight, you can do so. Thank you very much.
Ahmet Bey. Добрий день.
Там мені казали, що треба більше сказати. Це